The courthouse in rural Pennsylvania had seen its share of drama, shouting matches, tearful confessions, slammed gavels, but nothing prepared it for what happened that gray Tuesday morning. Outside, the sky hung low and heavy, pressing against the stone building like it, too, wanted inside. Reporters gathered on the steps, tipped off only by whispers. A dog bite case, a child involved, something unusual. Most assumed it would be quick and ugly. These cases usually were. Inside courtroom B, wooden benches creaked as people shifted impatiently. The air smelled faintly of old paper, floor cleaner, and nerves. The defendant's table sat empty except for a folded leash resting neatly on the polished surface, black nylon, frayed at the handle, unmistakably used. That alone unsettled people. Dogs weren't supposed to be defendants, yet here they were. The judge, Harold Whitman, reviewed his notes with a frown. 40 years on the bench had trained him not to expect surprises. Still, something about this case had bothered him since dawn. The file was thin, too thin. Photos of a man's forearm wrapped in gauze, a German shepherd labeled aggressive animal, a recommendation stamped in red ink. Euthanize. Whitman exhaled slowly and looked up just as the courtroom doors creaked open. At first, no one understood what they were seeing. A little girl stepped inside, her shoes lighting up with each hesitant step, pink, blue, pink again, tiny flashes against the dull courtroom floor. She couldn't have been more than 5. Her brown curls were half-tamed, half-wild, like they'd lost a battle with a hairbrush that morning. In her arms, she clutched a worn stuffed rabbit with one ear permanently bent. Beside her walked a German shepherd. The room reacted instantly. Someone gasped. A woman whispered, "Oh my God." A man in the second row stiffened and leaned back, as if the dog might leap the benches. The shepherd was large, easily 80 pounds, with a thick black and tan coat and intelligent amber eyes. His posture was calm but alert, muscles coiled beneath fur, every movement deliberate. A bailiff held the leash, but the dog didn't pull, didn't resist. He walked as if he knew exactly where he was. And why? The girl stopped just inside the courtroom, suddenly overwhelmed by the crowd, the high ceiling, the way all those adult faces turned toward her at once. She shrank back instinctively. The dog stepped forward. He positioned himself slightly in front of her, subtle, protective, practiced. That single movement sent a ripple through the room. The prosecutor straightened in his chair. The defense attorney froze mid-whisper. Judge Whitman's pen stopped moving. This was not in the schedule. The bailiff cleared his throat. "Your Honor, this is." "I know who this is," Whitman said quietly, eyes fixed on the child. The girl looked up at the dog, her fingers curling into the fur at his neck like it was the only solid thing in the room. Her voice was small, but it carried. "Buddy," she whispered. The dog's ears twitched. His tail gave a single, slow wag. The sound of that name, Buddy, changed something. It made the dog real, not an animal, not evidence, a presence. Judge Whitman leaned forward. "Who brought the child?" The mother stood from the back row, hands shaking. Her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. "I did, Your Honor. I wasn't told she couldn't come." The prosecutor opened his mouth. The defense attorney did the same. Whitman raised a hand. Silence fell. The judge studied the child more closely now. She wasn't fidgeting. She wasn't afraid of the dog. If anything, she looked afraid for him, like she'd been holding that fear all morning, all night, maybe longer. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Whitman asked gently. The girl hesitated, then whispered, "Lily." "And how old are you, Lily?" She held up 5 fingers. One of them had a purple marker stain that hadn't quite washed off. Whitman nodded slowly. "And do you know why you're here today?" Lily looked down at Buddy. Her lower lip trembled. "So they don't take him," she said. A murmur rolled through the courtroom like distant thunder. The neighbor, the man who'd reported the bite, shifted sharply in his seat. His jaw tightened. He hadn't expected this. None of them had. He'd expected paperwork, maybe testimony from animal control, not a child. Certainly not this child. Buddy sat when Lily stopped moving, his body brushing her leg. His eyes never left her face. Judge Whitman felt a pressure in his chest he hadn't felt in years. "This court does not usually allow animals in the courtroom," he said carefully, "especially in cases like this." Lily's grip tightened on the stuffed rabbit. "But," he continued, glancing at the leash, at the dog's calm posture, at the child's absolute trust, "this court also believes in hearing the truth." The prosecutor swallowed. "Your Honor." "Let her stay," Whitman said. A beat. Then another. No one argued. The bailiff loosened his hold on the leash just slightly. Lily took a few small steps forward until she stood between the two tables, the center of the room. She looked impossibly tiny there, swallowed by polished wood and adult judgment. Buddy followed, stopping exactly where she stopped. The judge gestured gently. "You can talk from there." Lily looked up at him, then back at Buddy. Her hand slid up to rest on his cheek, fingers sinking into familiar fur. The courtroom leaned in without realizing it. Even the man who'd been bitten, who'd sworn this dog was dangerous, felt his certainty wobble. Lily took a deep breath, one she clearly practiced when she was scared. She didn't look at the judge. She didn't look at the lawyers. She looked at the dog. And when she spoke, her voice carried something no one had expected to hear in a courtroom. Not fear. Not confusion. But heartbreak. "Buddy," she said softly, "why are they mad at you?" The question landed like a crack in glass. Buddy whimpered, low and quiet. Lily knelt down in front of him, the world around them fading as if the courtroom no longer existed. She pressed her forehead against his, the way children do when they're sharing a secret. "You're not bad," she whispered. "You promised." Judge Whitman felt his pulse quicken. This was no longer a routine case. This was a moment. And as Lily opened her mouth to ask the next question, the one that would shift the entire room, no one yet understood how deeply the truth was about to cut. The courtroom was silent, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to hear what the little girl would say next. Lily's small hand rested on Buddy's head, fingers tangled in thick fur, and she looked up at him as though expecting an answer. Her eyes were wide, bright with a mixture of fear and determination, a 5-year-old's courage in the face of grown-up judgment. The prosecutor, Mr. Hayden, leaned back in his chair, trying to mask the unease creeping up his spine. He had prepared his opening statements meticulously. Lists of injuries, witness statements, charts of bite patterns. All of it carefully organized to prove Buddy was a dangerous dog, unfit to live with a family, a threat to the community. But here in front of him, a child was about to speak to the dog himself, and the sterile, logical evidence felt suddenly fragile, flimsy. The defense attorney, Ms. Torres, watched closely. Her hand hovered over her notepad but didn't touch it. This was no standard trial. She had defended many cases, fought for countless clients, but none like this. She didn't need to take notes. She just needed to watch the child. Lily exhaled, a little shiver in her small body. Buddy leaned into her, steadying her as if sensing her nervousness. Then in that tiny, trembling voice, Lily began. "Buddy," she said, and her words hung in the air, "why did you bite the man?" The courtroom collectively inhaled. The question was simple, too simple, but it was the first crack in the carefully constructed narrative of dangerous animal that had filled the file. Everyone, Judge Whitman included, felt it. The room became dense, like thick smoke, the tension pressing against their chests. The neighbor, Mr. Carlton, shot a glare at the girl. He had come to court certain he would see justice done, certain the dog would pay for what he called an unprovoked attack. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of the wooden table. "This is ridiculous," he muttered under his breath. "A child talking to a dog." But Lily didn't look at him. She didn't even glance at the adults. She looked directly at Buddy, her gaze steady, pleading, full of the raw honesty only a child could wield. "Did you do it because you were bad?" she asked. The words hung in the air, soft but heavy, almost sacred. Buddy's ears flicked back, his body tensing ever so slightly, as if he understood the gravity of her question. A low, almost inaudible whine escaped his throat. A woman in the gallery, an animal rescue volunteer, shifted forward in her seat. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. "She's talking to him like he's listening," she whispered to herself, barely audible over the quiet hum of the courtroom. Lily's small hand moved down Buddy's side, rubbing in slow, circular motions, calming him as much as herself. "I know you're not bad," she said quickly, almost apologetically. "You always protect me." The judge's gavel rested untouched, his knuckles white as he gripped it. Whitman had seen countless witnesses testify. He had ruled in cases ranging from theft to assault to animal cruelty. But he had never, ever seen a 5-year-old interrogate a dog with such clarity, such precision, and above all, such authority. The room seemed to shift around him. The sterile courtroom became a living, breathing space where emotion and truth collided. Mr. Carlton shifted in his chair, unease creeping over his previously rigid posture. "This is absurd," he said, louder this time. "A dog can't answer, this is." "Silence," the judge said firmly, cutting him off. "Let her speak." The bailiff, who had held the leash all morning, exhaled, adjusting his grip. He knew Buddy well. The dog had been part of this family since he was a pup. He had trained with the child, responded to her commands, and protected her countless times. But even he was stunned at the bond displayed so openly in a courtroom, under bright lights and watchful eyes. Lily knelt down now, bringing her face closer to Buddy. The courthouse's overhead lights reflected in the dog's intelligent eyes, which seemed to soften, almost understanding the gravity of the moment. "He was yelling," Lily continued, her voice gaining steadiness. "He was yelling at Mommy." The courtroom gasped. Security guards shifted in their seats. Reporters leaned forward with pens poised, and the defense attorney's eyes widened. She had suspected the child might reveal something personal, but she hadn't anticipated this level of clarity. Lily wasn't merely a witness. She was a storyteller, painting a scene in vivid detail that no adult had articulated before. "You stood in front of me," she continued, her tiny hands brushing Buddy's fur as if it were a shield. "You told me to go hide. You always do that when people get scary." The mother, seated quietly in the back, pressed a hand over her mouth. She had lived this story in secret for years, a silent narrative of fear and courage, and now her daughter was voicing it aloud. Tears pooled in her eyes. She had tried to protect Lily from the world, from scrutiny, from judgment. But here, in the center of a courtroom, that protection had come in the form of a dog. The neighbor, Mr. Carlton, slammed a fist on the table. "That's not true," he barked, red creeping into his face. "You're making this up." The judge's gavel struck the bench. Bang! The sound cracked through the courtroom like thunder. "Sit down, sir," Whitman's voice echoed, firm and unyielding. "We will hear the testimony." Buddy let out a low, soft whine, almost in response. His eyes never left Lily's. The bond between child and dog was tangible, almost electric. The air was charged with tension, empathy, and fear, a mix that even seasoned journalists in the back had never witnessed before. Lily's eyes filled with tears, but her resolve didn't waver. "He grabbed me," she said simply, her small voice trembling but clear. Buddy didn't like that. The room went still. Even Mr. Hayden, the prosecutor, paused mid-note. Every adult in the room recognized the weight of her statement. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't fantasy. This was a factual, lived moment being recounted with piercing honesty. A photographer in the gallery lowered her camera. The lens no longer seemed important. No picture could capture the gravity of a child speaking truth through a dog's eyes. Buddy shifted slightly, leaning against Lily for reassurance. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't aggressive. He was calm, steady, protective. And in that calm, the courtroom realized something crucial. The narrative of aggressive animal was missing a key element, a child's perspective of fear, safety, and loyalty. The judge removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Whitman had presided over countless trials, but the emotion in the room made his chest tight. He glanced at the attorneys, the neighbor, the jury. If there was one present for this phase, every single adult was grappling with the undeniable truth forming before them. Buddy hadn't attacked without reason. He had defended. Lily looked up finally, addressing the judge as she squeezed Buddy's fur. "He was protecting me," she said, voice firm now, filled with conviction. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Everyone waited, hearts pounding, for the next words. The prosecutor's notes, the charts, the evidence, they all felt inadequate compared to the raw, undeniable testimony of a child speaking truth through a loyal dog. And then Lily leaned closer to Buddy again, her forehead resting on his head. Her whisper was so soft that only he, and perhaps the universe itself, could hear it. "I know you're brave, Buddy. I know you would never hurt me." The room held its breath, teetering on the edge of revelation. No one knew yet what came next, but they knew the story had shifted. What had been a straightforward case of dog aggression had now transformed into something far more profound, far more human, and far more dangerous for those clinging to their version of the truth. The tension was unbearable. Every adult in the room waited for the next move, the next word, the next revelation that would either save the dog or condemn him forever. And Lily, small and trembling but unshakably determined, was ready to speak it. The courtroom had grown impossibly still, a silence that weighed heavier than any gavel. All eyes were on Lily, perched in the center of the room like a fragile flame against the cold, imposing wood and stone. Buddy sat at her side, shoulders relaxed but alert, the perfect sentinel. The tension felt tangible, as though each heartbeat echoed against the walls. Lily's lips trembled slightly, not from fear but from concentration. She was 5 years old, yet her mind was laser-focused, her courage defying her size. She took a slow, deliberate breath and spoke directly to Buddy. "Why did you do it?" she asked softly, almost reverently. A whisper of sound escaped Buddy, a low whine that seemed more human than canine. The prosecutor's pen paused mid-scribble. The defense attorney leaned forward, pen poised, but she didn't write. There was nothing to record yet. This was bigger than words on paper. The gallery held its breath. Reporters, seasoned veterans of sensational court stories, stared wide-eyed. They had not expected this. A child questioning a dog in the middle of a courtroom, demanding answers, parsing morality. Lily's small hand reached up to Buddy's face, her fingers brushing the fur around his muzzle. "Did you do it because you were bad?" The words were so simple, so pure, that for a moment the courtroom seemed to vanish. The fluorescent lights above flickered faintly, the air seemed to thin, and the only sound was Buddy's soft breathing and the distant hum of the building's ventilation. Buddy's ears twitched. He whined again, low and almost sorrowful. He shifted closer to Lily as though to say, "No, I'm not bad." The judge, Whitman, adjusted his glasses, eyes narrowing. He had seen witnesses flinch, lawyers squabble, and defendants crumble, but he had never experienced anything like this. His chest tightened as he realized the power in that small, unwavering voice. "You always protect me," Lily continued, almost pleading now, pressing her forehead against Buddy's warm head. "Even when people are mean or loud or scary, you protect me." The mother, sitting quietly in the back, finally let a tear slip down her cheek. She had known, deep down, that Buddy had always been her daughter's guardian, her protector in ways that adults often overlooked. But hearing Lily articulate it so plainly, so desperately, was something entirely different. The neighbor, Mr. Carlton, shifted uncomfortably. His face, previously red with anger, had drained to a pale, almost ashen hue. He opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing he could say, not yet. Lily's small voice grew firmer. I know you didn't mean to hurt anyone. You were scared too, right? Buddy let out a soft bark, almost a sigh, and nudged her hand with his nose. The motion was subtle, but the courtroom recognized the significance. The dog was not aggressive. He was responding. He was acknowledging her words. The prosecutor, Mr. Hayden, cleared his throat uneasy. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Whitman raised a hand, silencing him. Let the child speak, he said quietly but firmly. His voice carried a weight that made even the seasoned lawyer hesitate. He understood that sometimes truth comes in forms no one expects. Lily knelt fully now, her knees scraping against the polished wooden floor. Her hand slid down Buddy's chest, gripping fur and muscle, feeling the strength and warmth beneath. I know you didn't like it when he grabbed me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, yet somehow every word reached the far corners of the courtroom. You told me to hide. You always do. That's why I know you're not bad. That's why I trust you. The gallery shifted in their seats. Reporters exchanged glances, pens hovering over blank pages. They had never witnessed anything like this. This wasn't testimony in the traditional sense. It wasn't evidence in the conventional form. It was honesty, pure and unfiltered, pouring from the lips of a child, bridged by the unwavering gaze of a dog. Lily's voice shook slightly as she spoke her next words, her small hands clutching Buddy's fur as if her grip could anchor the truth itself. He scared me. He made loud noises. He grabbed me, but you kept me safe. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even the bailiff, normally stoic, shifted uneasily. The power dynamics of the room had changed. Adults who had come prepared to argue, to dominate, to prove points, now found themselves caught in a narrative larger than logic, larger than law. The neighbor, Mr. Carlton, could no longer sit still. That's not how it happened, he barked, his voice trembling. You're lying. The dog attacked without provocation. Lily looked up at him then, her blue eyes blazing with a precocious intensity. I wasn't lying, she said, her voice shaking but growing louder, stronger. You were scary. You grabbed me. Buddy didn't want me to get hurt. He just saved me. There was a pause so long it felt as if the courthouse itself was holding its breath. Buddy leaned into Lily, his head resting lightly against her shoulder, silent but unwavering. The judge tapped the gavel lightly, restoring a semblance of order. Thank you, Lily, he said gently. That is very brave of you. The defense attorney swallowed hard, heart racing. She had known the bond between the girl and the dog was strong, but seeing it unfold publicly, under the harsh glare of the courtroom, added a layer of intensity she had never imagined. She could feel the scales tipping, evidence weighing differently in the eyes of everyone present, not because of numbers or charts, but because of truth. Mr. Carlton's fists clenched. He felt the certainty of his accusation slipping like sand through his fingers. Every adult in the room could feel it. Lily's words were cutting through the narrative of fear, of danger, exposing a vulnerability no one had accounted for. The gallery murmured softly, cameras clicking, pens scratching, the low hum of whispers filling the void left by silence. People weren't just watching a court case. They were witnessing courage, loyalty, and the raw truth of a child's perception. Lily knelt there, small but unyielding, and whispered one final thing to Buddy, words that struck a chord deeper than any evidence could. I know you're brave, she said, and I know you would never hurt me. The judge's eyes welled slightly. The mother's hands shook. Reporters' pens paused midair. Even the neighbor's chest tightened, a cold, uncomfortable knot forming as doubt began to creep in. The tension didn't dissipate, it multiplied. The courtroom understood collectively and silently that the narrative of the day had shifted. This wasn't just a case about a dog's aggression. It was about loyalty, protection, misunderstanding, and the small, powerful voice of a child that refused to be ignored. Judge Whitman leaned back slightly in his chair, heart pounding. He knew this was no longer a trial he could preside over in the usual way. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him. Evidence, photos, testimony, they all mattered less now than the truth emerging from the heart of a 5-year-old girl who refused to be silenced. Every adult in the room realized the trial had changed. The dog was no longer a defendant, he was a witness, a guardian. And Lily was no longer a child merely standing in court. She was the voice of clarity, the lens through which everyone would have to reconsider what really happened that day. The next words Lily would speak were about to tip the entire courtroom into a storm of revelation, one that no one would forget, and one that would force every adult present to confront a truth they hadn't expected. And as she lifted her face from Buddy's fur, her blue eyes shining with a mix of fear and certainty, the room collectively leaned forward. Every heartbeat quickened. Everyone knew, without a doubt, that the next moment would change everything. The silence was absolute. The tension was unbearable. And Lily, the smallest witness in the history of that courthouse, prepared to speak the truth that no one had anticipated. The courtroom had transformed into something almost unrecognizable. It was no longer just a space for legal argumentation. It had become a theater of truth, raw and intimate, with Lily and Buddy at its center. Every adult present felt the electric tension vibrating through the air, each heartbeat in the room synchronized with the child's trembling pulse. Lily straightened slightly, brushing a strand of brown hair from her forehead. She looked at Buddy, who sat silently, his eyes steady and attentive, as if he understood exactly what she was about to reveal. She pressed her small hands into his fur, gripping it like a lifeline, and then began to speak, not just as a witness, but as a storyteller of lived experience. "He was yelling," she said, her voice soft at first, almost swallowed by the vast courtroom. A collective intake of breath filled the air. Even the judge paused mid-note. Security personnel straightened, reporters leaned forward, and attorneys froze, pens hovering above paper. The words were so simple, yet their weight was enormous. "The man, he was yelling at Mommy," Lily continued, her small voice gaining clarity and force as the memory unfurled. She glanced toward her mother, who nodded subtly, encouraging her without saying a word. The courtroom collectively shivered. This wasn't imagination. This was something only she had seen. Mr. Carlton, the neighbor who had brought this case against Buddy, clenched his fists on the edge of the table. His knuckles turned white. "That's not true," he barked, his voice cracking slightly. "You're making things up." Lily didn't flinch. Her blue eyes, bright and unwavering, met his with a courage no adult in that room could ignore. "I'm not making it up," she said, her voice louder now. "I saw it. I saw him grab Mommy's arm. He was scary, and Buddy told me to hide." A hush fell over the room. The gallery, reporters, and court staff leaned forward, as if willing their bodies closer to the unfolding story. The mother in the back row covered her mouth with both hands, silent tears spilling freely. She had lived this truth in secret, protecting her child and her dog from suspicion and judgment. Now, her daughter was speaking it aloud, articulating events that had never been fully acknowledged, even by adults. The defense attorney, Ms. Torres, finally exhaled. She had anticipated the child might provide emotional testimony, but not with such specificity, not with such unshakable conviction. "Your Honor," she said carefully, "the child is recounting first-hand observations. This testimony is crucial to understanding the circumstances surrounding the incident." The judge, Whitman, nodded slowly. His fingers drummed lightly on the bench as he processed the gravity of the words. He had presided over countless cases, yet this moment struck him with an intensity he could not ignore. The narrative of aggression of a dangerous dog was suddenly incomplete, fragile, like a puzzle with a missing piece, and Lily held that piece in her tiny hands. Lily knelt fully now, bringing her forehead to Buddy's neck. "You stood in front of me," she said, her voice almost a whisper now, heavy with emotion. "You told me to go hide. You always do that when people get scary. You saved me. You saved me, Buddy." The courtroom fell completely silent. The low hum of the fluorescent lights, the the faint creak of the benches, even the distant ticking of a clock, all seemed to vanish. The memory Lily was revealing was a story no one else had heard, a narrative that reshaped the entire context of the case. Mr. Carlton's face turned crimson. His carefully constructed arguments about aggression, provocation, and liability began to crumble in the face of this child's testimony. He had come armed with photos, reports, and a conviction that Buddy was dangerous. But he had not counted on a small, 5-year-old girl whose perspective revealed an entirely different truth. Lily's eyes were bright with tears, but she was resolute. She glanced briefly at her mother and then addressed the judge, her voice trembling but steady. "He grabbed me," she said simply, the words heavy and deliberate. "Buddy didn't like that. He was scared too. He wanted to protect me." The defense attorney felt her chest tighten. She had known the bond between Lily and Buddy was strong, but hearing it articulated with such clarity, such unwavering honesty, was something else entirely. It was a revelation, a force that could not be measured in charts, photographs, or affidavits. Even the bailiff, who had been stoic all morning, shifted uneasily. He had handled Buddy countless times, witnessed his loyalty and calm, but seeing the interaction unfold publicly made it undeniable. The dog was a guardian, a protector, not an aggressor. Reporter pens scratched furiously, cameras clicked, but no photo or recording could truly capture the intensity of what was happening. The words themselves carried power, the weight of lived experience, innocence, and unassailable truth. Lily pressed closer to Buddy, her forehead resting against his neck. "He didn't want anyone to get hurt," she continued, almost to herself. He just wanted to protect me. That's why he bit. That's why he barked. That's why he stayed with me. He didn't want to hurt anyone. He wanted to keep me safe." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even the judge's pen had stopped moving. The audience, reporters, and court staff were caught in the emotional gravity of the testimony. Every adult in the room felt it, the powerful truth that sometimes protection looks like aggression, but only to those who don't understand. The mother, now openly crying, whispered, "Yes, that's exactly what happened." Her voice carried a relief mixed with grief, the relief of finally being heard, and the grief of knowing her daughter had been put in harm's way. Mr. Carlton's posture stiffened. His eyes darted around the courtroom, searching for support, for some acknowledgement that the story he believed in still held weight. But every glance he received was met with doubt, with questioning, with a silent acknowledgement that Lily's words had pierced the heart of the matter. The judge adjusted his glasses, exhaling slowly. He realized that the child's testimony had revealed a memory critical to understanding the entire incident. This was no longer just about dog bites. It was about context, about fear, about protection, about a child's perception of danger and a dog's unwavering loyalty. Buddy shifted slightly, nuzzling against Lily, as if affirming the truth she spoke. His eyes met hers, calm, intelligent, unwavering. The room recognized the unspoken bond between them, the silent communication that no adult could replicate or refute. Judge Whitman tapped his gavel lightly. "Thank you, Lily," he said softly. "That is very brave." But even he knew that simple acknowledgement could not fully encapsulate the impact of what had just been revealed. The courtroom remained suspended in tension. No one moved. No one spoke. The air was thick with the realization that the story had shifted dramatically. Buddy was no longer a mere defendant. He was a witness, a protector. And Lily was no longer just a child. She was a narrator of truth, her memory reshaping the understanding of events in a way no adult testimony could match. And then Lily, small but resolute, pressed her forehead closer to Buddy, whispering words that would linger long after the courtroom emptied. "You didn't do it because you were bad. You did it because you were brave." A collective shiver ran through the room. The next moments would not just decide the fate of a dog. They would force every adult present to confront a reality they had not been prepared to see. Every eye in the room followed Lily's small figure, every heartbeat quickened, and every soul present sensed the undeniable truth. The memory no one had heard before had just rewritten the story. And the tension, it had only just begun. The courtroom had shifted from a place of judgment to a theater of revelation. Every adult, from the judge to the reporters in the back, had their attention fixed on the child and the dog at the center. Lily's words had pierced the narrative of aggression, and now all that remained was to see if evidence would support her claims or destroy them. Judge Whitman called a brief recess. The bailiff carefully led Buddy and Lily to a side area behind the courtroom benches where the dog sat calmly, leaning against the child. Lily rubbed his ears softly, whispering, "We're almost done, Buddy. Just stay brave." The dog's amber eyes met hers, steady and unwavering, almost as if he understood every word. When the court reconvened, the judge gestured toward the clerk. "Bring in the evidence," he said, his voice measured but heavy with anticipation. The clerk wheeled a large monitor to the front of the courtroom. The prosecutor and defense attorney exchanged tense glances, neither fully prepared for the storm that was about to unfold. First, the security footage. A grainy video from a doorbell camera showed the incident from outside the neighbor's house. The image was shaky, distorted by sunlight and angle, but the action was clear. The neighbor, Mr. Carlton, had raised his voice, stepping aggressively toward the child and her mother. Lily's small hands were visible in the frame, clutching her mother's arm, and Buddy, ever vigilant, moved in front of her, not lunging without reason but reacting to the perceived threat. A collective gasp ran through the courtroom. Even Mr. Carlton flinched as the clip replayed in slow motion. He had never imagined the footage would tell a story so starkly different from the one he had reported. Lily's mother covered her mouth, eyes wide, tears spilling freely. "That's it, that's exactly it," she whispered. She had lived this memory over and over in her mind, silently fearing no one would ever believe it, and now here it was, undeniable. Next came the police report, which the prosecutor had assumed would bolster his argument. But as Judge Whitman read aloud, it became clear that key details had been overlooked in the initial filing. The report mentioned loud shouting, the child's visible distress, and Buddy positioning himself between Lily and the aggressor. One line stood out: "Dog did not bite until physically threatened child, retreated immediately afterward." The courtroom was silent, save for the soft hum of the projector. Every adult present felt the narrative cracking. The evidence was beginning to align with Lily's account, the account of a child who had witnessed, experienced, and interpreted danger in real time. Then came the photographs. High-resolution images of the minor injuries sustained by Mr. Carlton were displayed. They were real, undeniable, but context was everything. The angle of his arm, the location of the bite, sudden, defensive, almost accidental, told a story different from the one he had presented. It wasn't an unprovoked attack. It was intervention. Ms. Torres, the defense attorney, allowed herself a brief exhale. "Your Honor," she said, voice steady despite the tension, "the combination of first-hand testimony from the child, the security footage, and the police report demonstrates clearly that Buddy's actions were protective, not malicious. He responded to a threat, not with violence for its own sake, but to safeguard the child in his care." The judge nodded, his fingers drumming lightly on the bench. Even he felt the weight of the evidence stacking against the initial accusation. But it wasn't just the evidence. It was the way it resonated with the emotional truth presented by Lily. The prosecutor, Mr. Hayden, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had prepared his case meticulously. Charts, bite statistics, legal precedents. None of it accounted for the living truth of a child's perception, nor the corroborating evidence that validated it. He glanced at the neighbor, who sat frozen, realizing for the first time that the dog he had condemned was perhaps not a threat, but a hero. Lily reached out, touching Buddy's shoulder lightly, almost instinctively. "You did good, Buddy," she whispered, her voice carried across the hushed courtroom. "You kept me safe." Buddy leaned into her, his massive body a shield. His calmness, his loyalty, his sheer presence, combined with the evidence now displayed, made the adults in the room reconsider everything they thought they knew. The neighbor's face twisted in disbelief and shame. His certainty had evaporated, leaving only the stark reality of the footage, the report, and the child's unflinching account. He opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to argue, but no words came. Every glance he received reflected doubt, disappointment, and the quiet recognition that he had misjudged both dog and child. Judge Whitman's voice cut through the tension. The evidence presented today, coupled with testimony from the youngest witness in this case, offers a clear and compelling narrative, one that indicates the dog's actions were in defense of the child, not an unprovoked act of aggression. A low murmur ran through the courtroom. Cameras clicked rapidly, reporters leaning forward, struggling to capture the gravity of what had just been revealed. The story was no longer a simple dog bite case. It was about courage, protection, and the profound, often overlooked intelligence of animals in the lives of children. Lily's small hands rested firmly on Buddy's neck, her blue eyes shining with the quiet pride of someone who had just changed the course of events. The dog's amber eyes met hers, steady, unwavering. In that moment they were partners in revelation, their bond undeniable, their truth incontrovertible. Even the defense attorney allowed herself a tiny smile. She had believed in Buddy, had known his nature, but watching it confirmed so publicly, so decisively, was something else entirely. She could feel the momentum shifting toward justice, toward recognition, toward the acknowledgement of truth. The judge leaned back, sighing deeply. "We will reconvene for deliberation, but the clarity of the evidence is undeniable. The dog acted in defense, and the child's account has been corroborated in multiple ways. This court will take all of this into serious consideration." And yet, even as relief swept through the courtroom, a palpable tension remained. Lily's words, Buddy's actions, the evidence displayed, it was clear that this was not simply a legal case. It had become a moral reckoning, a confrontation with assumptions, fears, and the raw truth of protective instinct. As the gallery whispered and the attorneys prepared to continue, Lily leaned forward, whispering one last reassurance to Buddy. "We're going to be okay. You did your job." The dog nudged her hand with his nose, calm, proud, unafraid. But outside the courtroom, the world was waiting. Reporters would broadcast the story, neighbors would gossip, social media would explode with clips of a 5-year-old speaking to her dog in court. And the question that hung heavier than ever before, one that no one could answer yet, was: would the truth be enough to protect Buddy from the adults who had once feared him? Every adult in the room knew, instinctively, that the story was far from over. And Lily, clutching her dog's fur like a lifeline, prepared to face the next chapter, a chapter where courage, loyalty, and the undeniable truth of a child's perspective would confront the full weight of human judgment. The tension was far from over. The revelation had begun, but what came next would challenge everyone in the room in ways no one yet imagined. The courtroom had quieted to an almost unbearable degree. The evidence had been laid bare, the child's words corroborated, and Buddy, ever calm, ever steadfast, sat beside Lily, a pillar of silent strength. The judge's gavel rested lightly in his hand, but the weight of what was about to unfold pressed on everyone in the room more than any official ruling ever could. Lily's small hands rested firmly on Buddy's neck, fingers gripping fur, knuckles white from the effort to maintain control over her trembling body. Her eyes, wide and blue, shone with determination and fear simultaneously. The courtroom seemed to shrink around her, all attention focused on the tiny figure who was about to speak words that could alter everything. Judge Whitman leaned forward in his chair, pen hovering over his notes. "Lily," he said gently, "is there anything else you would like to say?" Lily looked up at him, then at Buddy, then back at him, her lips pressed together, then parted. "Yes," she said, voice small but steady. "I need to tell you, if you take him away, She swallowed hard, tears forming in the corners of her eyes. "If you take him away, who will protect me next time?" The words hung in the air like a hammer suspended before impact. Every adult in the room froze, caught between disbelief, emotion, and the raw power of that simple, terrifyingly honest statement. The gallery murmured, reporters paused mid-pen stroke, and even the attorneys felt the gravity press down on their chests. There was a long pause, a collective inhalation, as the tension seemed to solidify into something almost tangible. Buddy nudged Lily gently with his nose, as if reassuring her. He leaned into her small body, his warmth and calm presence a living testament to her words. The mother, sitting in the back, could no longer contain her emotions. She stood abruptly, her voice shaking as she addressed the judge. "Your Honor, my daughter, she relies on Buddy. He is her protector, her friend, her guardian. If he is taken from her, it's not just the dog that will suffer, it's her. She'll be alone in ways she can't handle." The judge nodded, his expression solemn. He had witnessed countless courtroom dramas, but none had carried the emotional intensity of this moment. He understood the unspoken truth. This was not merely a legal question. It was a moral and human one. The prosecutor, Mr. Hayden, shifted uncomfortably. He had come prepared with charts, statistics, and legal precedent, but none of it accounted for the raw, irrefutable reality being presented by a 5-year-old child. He cleared his throat. "Your Honor," he began, trying to regain composure, "while I acknowledge the child's testimony, we must consider the law. There was an incident that resulted in injury. We cannot ignore that." Judge Whitman raised a hand, cutting him off. "I understand, Mr. Hayden, but law alone does not always tell the full story. We must also weigh intent, context, and, most importantly, the protection of a vulnerable child. That is what this testimony reveals." The defense attorney, Ms. Torres, felt a surge of hope. She had seen the fear and courage in Lily's eyes, had witnessed Buddy's calm presence, and now the law itself seemed to bend toward the truth that had been exposed. "Your Honor," she said, "we also have to consider the psychological impact on the child. Removing Buddy would not only punish him unjustly, it would traumatize Lily. Her bond with Buddy is her safety net, her anchor in the world." The judge exhaled slowly, removing his glasses. He had faced difficult cases before, but rarely had he encountered a situation where evidence, emotion, and moral clarity converged so sharply. Lily knelt, head resting on Buddy's neck again, whispering words meant only for him. "Please, don't let them take you. Please stay with me." Her voice cracked, tears flowing freely now. The room was captivated, not by legal argumentation but by the raw honesty of a child's fear. It was impossible to ignore, impossible to dismiss. Even the neighbor, Mr. Carlton, who had been the driving force behind the complaint, shifted in his chair. His confidence had crumbled as he watched footage, read reports, and heard the child recount events with clarity he could not dispute. For the first time, he faced a truth that unsettled him. He had misjudged the dog, misjudged the situation, and underestimated the bond between child and animal. Lily's words echoed through the courtroom, a haunting plea that carried far beyond the walls. "If you take him away, who will protect me?" The judge tapped the gavel lightly, but the sound felt insignificant compared to the weight of her statement. He understood, in a way that transcended legal definitions, that Buddy's presence was not just about companionship. It was about safety, trust, and survival. Reporters in the back whispered to one another, pens and cameras poised, capturing every second of the moment. Social media would later erupt with snippets of Lily's plea, the emotional resonance spreading like wildfire. Millions would watch a 5-year-old speak with courage and clarity that adults often lacked, and the country would feel the raw impact of her truth. The courtroom held its collective breath as Judge Whitman leaned forward, eyes meeting Lily's. "Lily," he said softly, "you have shown bravery beyond your years. Your words have been heard and considered. This court will take them into account in its final decision." Lily nodded, her small body trembling from the weight of both fear and hope. Buddy leaned against her, silent and protective, as if he understood the significance of every moment, every heartbeat. The mother wrapped an arm around her daughter, pulling her close, whispering softly, "You were so brave, baby, so brave." And yet the tension lingered. The courtroom understood that while the plea had been made, the decision still hung in the balance. Every adult present felt the uncertainty, the moral weight, and the emotional gravity of what was at stake. The life of a loyal, protective dog and the safety and well-being of a child rested on the judge's next words. The courtroom seemed frozen in time, a collective heartbeat held in suspense, waiting for the resolution that could either honor the truth or shatter it. Lily's small fingers clutched Buddy's fur tighter. Her eyes, bright and tear-streaked, never left his face. She whispered one last word under her breath, almost inaudible but filled with unshakable faith. "Please." And in that moment, every person in the room, adult and child alike, understood that the story had transcended law. It had become a tale of trust, courage, and the bond between a child and her protector. No one spoke. No one moved. The suspense was unbearable. Every heartbeat in that courtroom was synchronized with Lily, and every soul present felt the weight of what was about to happen, the decision that would decide Buddy's fate, and in a profound way, the fate of the child he had sworn to protect. The courtroom was charged with tension, thick and almost suffocating. Every eye, from the back gallery to the front bench, was fixed on Judge Whitman as he adjusted his glasses and leaned forward on the polished wooden desk. The judge had listened to testimony, reviewed evidence, and witnessed a moment that would forever be etched in his memory. A 5-year-old child speaking with clarity, courage, and honesty directly to a dog in the center of a legal case. The bailiff tightened his grip on Buddy's leash, though the dog remained perfectly calm, sitting proudly beside Lily. There was no trembling, no fear, just a quiet, unwavering strength that seemed to fill the entire courtroom. Lily, her small hands pressed into his fur, looked up at the judge with a mix of hope and apprehension. Whitman exhaled slowly. "The court has reviewed all testimony, examined the evidence presented, and considered the arguments of counsel." His voice was measured, but there was an unmistakable weight behind it. Every person in the room leaned forward slightly, holding their breath. "The evidence demonstrates that the dog, Buddy, acted not with malice, but with protective instinct in response to a threat directed toward a minor." The words were simple, but the courtroom felt as though they were being etched into stone. Lily's mother squeezed her daughter's hand, tears spilling freely. The defense attorney's heart raced, while the prosecutor, Mr. Hayden, looked increasingly uncomfortable. He had anticipated a clear-cut case, a straightforward path to liability and enforcement, but the courtroom had shifted in ways he had not predicted. "The security footage clearly shows that the adult involved approached the child aggressively," the judge continued. "The police report, when reviewed in full context, supports the claim that the dog intervened defensively, without intent to cause unnecessary harm. And most importantly, the child's testimony, spoken directly to the dog and corroborated by all other evidence, provides an accurate account of the circumstances leading to the incident." A low murmur ran through the courtroom. The gallery, reporters, and staff exchanged glances, acknowledging that the story they had expected, a dangerous dog, a reckless attack, had been rewritten entirely by the courage of a child and the steadfast loyalty of an animal. Whitman's eyes softened as he looked at Lily. "Given these circumstances, this court finds that Buddy is not a dangerous animal, and the recommendation for euthanasia is hereby dismissed." Gasps erupted across the room. Some were audible, some were swallowed in disbelief. Lily's mother rose to her feet, holding back sobs, while reporters quickly adjusted cameras and microphones to capture the emotional crescendo. Buddy leaned into Lily, nudging her with his nose as if sensing the wave of relief and joy that washed over her. The judge paused, letting the weight of his words settle into the hearts of all present. Furthermore, he continued, the court finds that all charges relating to alleged aggression in this incident are dismissed. The dog acted solely in defense of a minor, and no punitive action against him is warranted. Applause erupted, soft at first, then louder, until the courtroom seemed to vibrate with the emotion of the moment. People stood, many wiping tears from their eyes, overwhelmed by the extraordinary scene they had witnessed. Cameras clicked, pens scratched furiously, and whispers of disbelief mixed with awe spread through the audience. Lily, still kneeling beside Buddy, buried her face in his fur. "We're okay," she whispered, her voice muffled but trembling with relief. "You're okay." Buddy responded with a low, approving whine, pressing his massive head against her small shoulder. Even the defense attorney felt a rush of victory she had not experienced in years. She had fought many battles in courtrooms across the state, but none with this combination of emotion, innocence, and truth. Watching the bond between Lily and Buddy recognized and vindicated was profoundly moving. The mother finally allowed herself to cry openly, hugging her daughter tightly. "You were so brave, baby," she whispered repeatedly, "so brave." Meanwhile, the neighbor, Mr. Carlton, slumped in his chair. His face was pale, and his hands trembled slightly. He had entered the courthouse certain that Buddy would be punished, certain that justice would be served for what he perceived as an unprovoked attack. But every shred of that certainty had been dismantled by the child's testimony, the evidence, and the undeniable bond between Lily and her dog. Judge Whitman looked toward him with measured calm. "It is clear from the evidence and testimony that any actions taken by the dog were in defense of the child. This court strongly advises that the adult parties involved in the incident reflect carefully on their behavior and approach to children and animals in the future." The words hit hard. The neighbor's lips pressed into a thin line, his guilt and shame visible for all to see. It was not punishment in the legal sense, but the moral weight of his actions was now unmistakable. Lily lifted her head, wiping tears from her cheeks, and looked around the courtroom. Her small voice carried across the chamber. "He was being brave," she said, her words simple but precise. "Not bad, brave." The statement resonated with everyone present. There was no room for misinterpretation. The truth had been spoken, and it was absolute. Outside, the story would explode on social media. Clips of a 5-year-old speaking to her dog in court, coupled with images of the mother, the dog, and the judge, would go viral. Millions would witness the courage of a child, the loyalty of an animal, and the power of truth in its purest form. But inside the courtroom, the focus remained on the human and animal bond that had been vindicated, the quiet triumph of honesty, and the profound realization that sometimes the smallest voice carries the heaviest weight. Judge Whitman lowered his gavel, signaling the formal conclusion of the proceedings. "This court is adjourned." Applause and murmurs filled the chamber. People rose, some hugging, some taking pictures, others simply standing in stunned silence, absorbing the extraordinary moment they had witnessed. Lily hugged Buddy one last time before standing, her small hand brushing against his fur. "We did it," she whispered. Buddy nudged her hand gently, a silent acknowledgement that the ordeal was over for now. Even as the courtroom emptied, the moral and emotional impact lingered. Reporters scrambled to capture statements, the mother held her daughter tightly, and attorneys conferred quietly. But for those who had witnessed it, the story would not fade. It would live in memory, a testament to courage, loyalty, and the undeniable bond between a child and her protector. And outside, in the hushed anticipation of what came next, one question lingered in everyone's mind. What other truths, hidden and overlooked, might emerge when the smallest voices are finally heard? The verdict was clear. The applause was loud. Buddy had been saved, and Lily had spoken with a power that no adult, no evidence, and no authority could ignore. But the shadow of responsibility, the lessons learned, and the lingering questions about human judgment ensured that the story and its emotional resonance would follow them all long after the gavel fell.